stories from me. And when you have people in a high level wanting what you're offering, it also allows me to then lift up friends and colleagues of mine who would be in similar situations like me, who might be not this, they might not be the front and center candidate for a job because they might be seen as, they're existing sort of on the outside, as so many of us are in this industry. So to get that kind of power to be able to say to an executive that I'm meeting with, I really want to, I like your idea, or I have an idea, I'd like to write it with somebody who, and this is a person who might not have a tremendous amount of experience, but they're going to come along on the journey with me. And that's been, to me, one of the greatest takeaways from this whole thing is not just the opportunities that have opened up for me, but having the ability to then fold in friends and colleagues and give them opportunities that they might not be able to have had it not been for what I have achieved. So it's this, I've realized that a lot of the hard work, success isn't success if you can't share it with people. And I think in entertainment, we tend to be very focused on ourselves and making sure that we get successful. But it's a pretty lonely experience if you don't use the success that comes to you for a greater good and allow other people's voices to be heard.
Moving away though from your work on Schitt's Creek, you've done literally so many other incredible things. And you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about your experience being a TV host for MTV Canada at kind of the start of your acting career. So how did that propel you towards other opportunities, and like how did you choose which creative endeavors you wanted to explore?
Well, I really stumbled into my job at MTV. I didn't ever really plan on being a television host, but I was very sort of socially awkward and anxious in my early 20s and late teens. And I saw the audition to, host a television show as an opportunity to potentially pull myself out of my shell. And somehow I managed to get the job. And that job did do just that. I had to speak to strangers every day of my life, which was so foreign to me. Like, I really did not like meeting new people. If I were left to my own devices, I would be home a lot just with like a small group of friends. So that job inadvertently brought me out of my shell and also made me a more confident person in front of the camera. And when I finally decided to leave MTV, which was a tough decision because, at the time I was gaining a lot of success in Canada, but I knew that this job wasn't it. I knew that it wasn't fulfilling me in a way that I was feeling, it just didn't make me feel very good by the end of it. And when I walked away from that job, I don't know where I had the intellectual intelligence to do this, because I certainly don't have it now, but I made this choice to say to myself, you have a job right now that is in front of the camera. People know who you are. There's a lot of perks that come with that job. You're walking away from it. Do not let your ego dictate your future. And by that, I mean, I had to be okay to maybe write a children's book, maybe work in a bookstore. I had worked at Gap Kids as a teenager. I worked in a bakery as a teenager. I was okay to go back there if need be. The only thing that I think stands in so much of our way is like worrying about, well, in my case, it was like, well, what if someone asks me why I'm not on TV anymore? What am I going to tell them? Doesn't matter. Tell them you're figuring out your life. And that was a kind of freedom. Just saying I'm no longer going to be tied to this ego idea of like who I should be or who I think would be an impressive person for people to see me as, but rather just keep on your path. And my path diverged after that 8 years on MTV. And in the process of just figuring out what I wanted to do next, I started to write. And the idea for this show came to me quite organically. And it came to me, I truly believe, because I had a clear head, because I wasn't worrying about like, why all my friends are on TV and working, why aren't I? You can't do it. So that was kind of the greatest gift that I gave myself, and I look back thinking like, where did I have I was like an incredibly evolved 20 something, because I don't think I have that kind of um clarity of intellectual clarity now, but it really changed my whole life, and it found my path for me in a way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So more with your acting career, you were in the film Admission in 2012 with Tina Fey and Paul Rudd. So could you share with us a little bit about that experience working with them or anything you learned?
That was the most nervous I have ever been in my life. It was my first job in a movie, and I played a tour guide at Princeton. And part of what I had to do as this tour guide was recite essentially a monologue of historical facts and dates about Princeton University, because I was leading a tour. That's a tough thing to do when you're confident. When you're anxious, your brain it is not working. And I completely panicked. I couldn't get through my lines. It was a huge struggle for me. Um, and I walked away from that first day thinking like, I don't know if I have what it takes to succeed in this industry. It's As an actor, you walk onto a film set, no one tells you how it works. No one tells you that there's a very sort of specific way to act and what everybody's doing. There's three different cameras shooting at you. Which how what is a how do you block a scene? As an actor, you don't necessarily go through training to do that. So me being an anxious person walking onto a film set which has its own set of rules that I didn't even know about, nobody was around to sort of help guide me through the process, nor should they be, but it became this like incredibly overwhelming experience for me. And then I had to go back 2 weeks later and shoot another scene where I'm telling even more information about Princeton and like dates and times. And I'm looking behind me at like Paul Rudd and Tina Fey, who I've looked up to for so long, thinking they must think I am so incapable. This is a nightmare. Um, but I was fortunate enough to have an incredible director on that movie who was so kind and so supportive and encouraging, because I think that's where things can fall apart if you don't have people around you who make it comfortable for you. So while I was going through a tremendous amount of anxiety, I did have the support of the actors and I had the support of the crew. Do I wish I could do it over again now that I'm a slightly more confident actor? 100%. But I do feel like it's one of those like building block moments in your career that really kind of almost make you feel like, well, at least that's out of the way. So nothing can be quite as anxiety inducing as that. Everything from there on in will hopefully be a little bit smoother.
Thank you for being so candid about your experiences in the industry. I think there's like one, like you start working and then you make it, and that's the perception that we have. But yeah,
No, I think you have to be honest about it because it's a really difficult industry to succeed in. And I think this idea that nobody talks about how hard it is or how tricky, or the concept of anxiety, and how if you're a person who wants to be an actor but you also happen to struggle with anxiety, it can be an incredibly isolating experience because you look around and you see successful people booking jobs. You have to be open and honest, because that's again a connector. That's a way to build a bridge to people, to make them feel less alone, so that young people who are just starting out, who might be experiencing the same kinds of anxieties, there's a comfort at least in knowing that that is something that so many actors share, more actors than I think want to admit it, because I think a lot of people want to make it seem like they have their shit together. And sometimes there's more power in admitting that you don't have your shit together, to be honest.
you worked with Tina Fey on this movie, and you recently got to grace the same stage she used to work at. You hosted Saturday Night Live back in February. And what was that experience like? And how did it compare to other shows you've had the opportunity to host?
Um, I mean, Saturday Night Live is one of those moments where you have to kind of pinch yourself and say, how did I get here? You know, as like a kid, I would watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday, and I knew all the different casts and I knew all the different characters. And you know, as a teenager who, you know, like you, was in an improv class and had aspirations to, you know, be on that stage one day, it was an incredibly surreal thing to suddenly be backstage and hear my name called and walk out onto that stage and suddenly be out there. It's surreal. It doesn't feel real. You, especially considering COVID was in effect and you're in masks and everyone's getting tested, and it's not quite as obviously as fun as it can be before COVID, because it's just a very different way of operating. But the cast was so great, and it's always great to meet people that you've long admired and have them be cool and like really fun and nice and helpful. And I felt so taken care of by the cast once I was out on stage. And um, you know, when I was finally able to act without a mask on, it like I came I sort of came alive again. I was panicking because when you're doing comedy with like a mask on like this, it's not, you don't feel very funny, and all you can really do is like overperform with the top part of your face. So I just kept thinking like, gosh, am I a terrible actor? What's going on here? And then suddenly you're able to use your mouth and everything came alive. It was an incredible experience, and one that I will remember for a very long time.
Being a writer yourself, were you able to collaborate on sketch writing for SNL? And what was your favorite sketch to participate in?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The great thing about SNL is that it's seemingly so collaborative, or at least it was with me. Um, yeah, in the first few days of the week, in the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, you have people coming to you with ideas, and I was very fortunate enough to be able to collaborate, or at least offer my input on where I thought that I could sort of fit within the scenes. And that was a really fun thing to explore because I hadn't done sketch writing for a very long time. And to get to play with people who are at the top of their game is obviously like the best. um, and I think my favorite sketch, I really liked working with Kate McKinnon. That was very cool. I've long admired Kenan Thompson on that show, and to get to work with him, he flies in on Saturday morning because he's shooting a television show in LA. So I didn't get to see him until that Saturday when he flew in, and I had one conversation with him earlier, like a couple months earlier, and he's just such a great guy. So yeah, those two scenes were fun for me, just because I got to work with people I love.
That all sounds pretty fun. Aside from your acting career, you created your own eyewear line, DL Eyewear. So my first part of my question is, are you wearing frames from your eyewear line right now? And then two, what was your inspiration behind creating it and behind supporting the local initiatives support corporation?
Hell yeah, I am wearing my glasses. These are relatively new. They just came out. When I left MTV about 8 or 9 years ago, I've been wearing glasses my whole life. And when I was on television and I had a job that paid me an okay salary, I was able to buy designer glasses that I loved. And in the process, I had a lot of younger people reaching out to me saying, you know, where did you get your glasses? And there was something sort of uncomfortable about telling like a 13-year-old kid to spend $400 on a pair of Tom Ford glasses. And so when I left MTV and I was really trying to figure out where my passions lied, I knew that I had like instincts to be an entrepreneur. I loved the idea of like building a company from the ground up. And I thought, well, I love fashion. I don't know, I can't sketch. I don't know much about designing clothes, but I do know about eyewear. And so I started to put this business together. And originally it was just so that I could put out a collection of eyewear that I really loved, that I wanted to wear myself, but was also at a price point that was within people's healthcare plans, so that everyone could have one if they wanted to, or buy a couple to collect for the same price as one pair of designer frames. And so I built it for 4 years, and then when Schitt's Creek started, because I was doing everything, I was doing social media, I was placing the orders, I was designing the frames, I just couldn't do both. And I am the first person to sort of stand behind the idea that like quality over quantity. And when I didn't have the time to do the line, we put it on the back burner for like 5 years. And just as Schitt's Creek ended, I decided to bring it back. I have a great team in place now, and we aligned with Lisk. Again, this idea that like success should always come with a level of sharing, the ability to share success when it happens. I didn't necessarily want to like start a business, have it succeed because people were watching my show, and then just like make money from it. I really wanted there to be an element of sharing that kind of success. And so we partnered with Lisk, so that part of our the success of our company then allows other small businesses to succeed as well. So it's this, pay it forward approach to everything that I think is so crucial in maintaining like your head like through a very intimidating process. Like at the end of the day, you kind of just need to know that you're doing some good, in addition to having relative success in a very, very strange industry that can make you lose your head.
As someone who needs glasses constantly, yes.
I got you.
So the University of Iowa has a very robust creative writing, cinematic arts, and screenwriting programs. From start to finish, what does your writing process consist of? And do you have any tips for students who are aspiring screenwriters, such as myself?
Okay. Well, funny you ask, because I just finished writing my first screenplay. And it was very different than writing television. It's a totally different process. I turn to the internet. It's funny because I was watching Michaela Cole on, I think it was Stephen Colbert, and she admitted that every time she starts a new show, she Googles, how do you write a television show? And it's exactly sort of what I do too. There was comfort in knowing that she did it as well, and she's making some pretty excellent TV. I really there are books you can read, particularly for screenwriting. There's a book called Save the Cat, which I don't know if you have, but I would definitely pick it up if you don't. It's a really great guide to making a good script. It gives you all the ingredients you need. It walks you through, the various steps that you should ask yourself in order to get to a point where you begin to write. It's all about structure and making sure that you have enough story to fill the pages of a 90-page or 110-page script. So I tend to follow that sort of guide sort of loosely. But I'm also someone who really has to feel out each idea. Some ideas I really feel like only I need to write. And then there are ideas where I think, gosh, this is not coming easily to me. Maybe I should bring a writing partner into the mix, someone that I really trust who can hold me accountable, and we can get through this together. That's happened on many occasions where I get just stuck. And I really love the collaborative process of writing. I always love writing with people. There are rare occasions where I write just myself. Episodes of my show, I obviously loved writing by myself, but it came from a writer's room. I think it's knowing your comfort zones and being okay to say, maybe I want to go to someone for this. Maybe I want to write with somebody. At least that's been the big revelation for me, because I sort of thought, well, I look at some of my peers who write completely on their own and think, well, am I not as good a writer if I like writing with people? And the answer is no. Everybody has their own path to get to the same end goal, and ultimately just do what you need to do to get there. So that's sort of my advice at this point.
Now for our final question for this portion of the evening. What advice do you have for the students watching tonight?
Be kind to one another. I think that's something that I will say casually, but something I will also say quite seriously. I think whether we're talking socially, whether we're talking professionally, being aware of the people around you is a really crucial thing. And I hope that this year has illuminated that for everybody, just how necessary it is to be aware and compassionate to your neighbor. And, you know, I guess from a professional standpoint, the advice I always give is like, if you have an idea, if there's something you want, get it. If there's something you want to make it. No matter how hard it may seem, no matter how many roadblocks might come in your way, if you actually follow through with something, you are 99% ahead of everybody else. Think about how many people do not follow through. If you can actually follow through on something you want to do, if you want to write a script, if you want to write a movie, write the movie. Get it done, because you're then going to have a script in your hand. And even if no one wants to make that movie, you've gone through the process of writing a script, which means that the next time that you sit down to write that script, it's going to be just a little bit easier than it was the last time. And you'll keep going back and you'll keep writing those scripts, but it's so rare for anybody to actually just follow through. So, professionally speaking, that is always the advice I give. Make sure that you follow through, because you want to be the person, you know, that's like holding that script, or that's I don't know, that's all I only know my own industry. I guess plant that garden. I don't know, do whatever you want to do, but do it. Don't just say you're going to do it and then not do it. Actually do it. And that I'm telling you, success will come, doors will open, opportunities will come your way if you have something to show for the work, if you execute an idea.
That is great. Thank you so much, Dan. We will now move into our audience Q&A portion of the night. Students from all three schools will be reading questions for Dan